Hi, Jody. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Holistic Hub podcast. I am so excited to interview you. This has been a long time in the making, at least for me, to want to interview you. So thanks for being a guest.
No, I'm really excited to delve into mast cells and all of these things because I have personal experience along with professional experience.
That always is good. I love that. I love having both of the experiences combined. Well, then talking about experience, I'd really love to then dive into what kind of got you started in wanting to create your company, Vibrant Blue Oils. And did it delve in from a personal experience, or was it just something you were very interested in crafting these essential oil blends? I'm just so curious to hear your story.
I think necessity is the mother of invention. I never set out to start a company. I'm the mother of two. My first child was super easy, so I had another one 22 months later who was a different story. He was just really nonstop, very ADD, very kind of all over the place. Like I would take all these parenting classes. One of our cues was like, look at my nose. And he really couldn't. And then one day a friend noticed that his personality changed after he ate something. And she said, that's really interesting. My brother was on Ritalin his whole life, and it turned out he was just allergic to weird foods. So I took him to a nutritionist, changed his diet, and the next day he could look at our nose. And I was so blown away because parenting can be kind of a competitive sport. Like people can be a little mean, if your kid isn't really fitting in the box. And I couldn't believe that it was that simple. And so I felt like, how did I not know this? And how does everyone not know this? So I went back and got a degree in nutrition and was really trying to integrate like really clean food into our diet. Some he would eat, some he wouldn't. And so I started using oils just on his feet, just to help him relax at night, to help him focus. And that was why we had a bunch of oils in our house. And then his dad suffered from depression to the point where I got a little nervous that he might die on my watch. And so I moved him into a residential treatment facility. And once I knew that he was safe, and it wasn't my job to keep him safe, it was like I had crossed the finish line for a 10-year marathon. Like I had been so, hyper vigilant and sympathetic dominant for the entire course of our relationship without even realizing it. It's like the frog in the boiling water. I just kept taking on more and more and more. And I finally ran out of gas. And, the kids were 5 and 7. I had a full-time job. I was class parent. Soccer coach, all of these responsibilities. And I would get up with them in the morning, make their breakfast, pack their lunch, check their homework, drop them at school, come home, crawl back into bed and set the alarm for pickup. And that was about all I could handle. But, my company was like, they were trying to be compassionate, but they're like, you either need to show up or we need to replace you because this work needs to get done, which was reasonable. Mm-hmm. And so I started thinking like I've been supporting my adrenal glands. What else could it be? And I had been doing yoga for long enough. And one of the instructors talked a lot about the vagus nerve and how you can kind of stimulate it, by the earlobe. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I started doing research about how do you stimulate your vagus nerve. And I stumbled upon this implant that's surgically implanted that stimulates it kind of behind the earlobe. And something about the word stimulate, some of these oils that I was rubbing on my son's feet are hot. They're stimulatory, which means that like your hand gets red, it feels hot. And I had this moment of, I wonder if I could use a stimulatory oil to stimulate my vagus nerve. And so I started playing. And I made up what is now our parasympathetic blend, which is clove, super stimulatory, and lime, and just started using it. It's a little bit like you come home from a long day and what do you have in your fridge? I guess that's what you're making for dinner. I just kind of made it up. And it worked really well. And it really served this niche. Like we can talk a little bit about how, your nervous system is designed to keep you alive. So it's got the danger gear, the fight or flight branch called the sympathetic nervous system, which when the body senses danger, both physical danger or emotional or mental danger, it allocates resources towards survival, which means blood is routed to the arms and the legs so you can fight back or flee, and away from the core, away from digestion, away from detoxification. And ideally, the danger passes and we gear shift back into our parasympathetic state where all healing occurs, often it does not. We stay stuck in that sympathetic state. And so the vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 10, is the gear shift between danger and safety. And anatomically, it starts at the base of the neck, splits, and is most accessible on both sides behind the earlobe in that divot. And then it winds through your core and every organ of digestion and detoxification. So I stumbled into this idea that, we can use our skin and topical application to apply something. It's natural, it's easy, it smells good. And then, I had all these nutrition friends. I was kind of giving it out to them. They're like, this is great. You should do something with this. And I finally kind of had, I was far enough back to myself that I was like, oh, someone must be doing this. Like, it's so obvious. And I finally went online and researched it. And I was really surprised that no one was really using essential oil blends that way. And even more surprised that they made it seem so complicated. I was almost grateful that I could barely function, because if I had started, with research, I would have felt unqualified and not done it. And so they really encouraged me. They were like, there's a nutritional therapy conference. It's only like $200 to be a vendor. And that was my background, was kind of product marketing. And so I thought, oh, I can put a test kit together. Like, that actually is fairly easy for me. So we, I think, made 100 test kits. We showed up at the conference and we sold out in the first hour. And so I hired my friend to build a website. I would fill orders after the kids went to bed. And then after I dropped them at school, I would, drop them in the mailbox. And that's kind of how it started.
Oh my gosh, that is such a cool story. It's always so cool to hear people's like paths, like where they end up with their business or their career, and how it almost just like happened by chance. Like, it wasn't something you were seeking out. It just happened to be like from a personal story with your son. And then you just started crafting it. Your friends were like, this is great. You should go sell this. And then in the first hour it sells out. Like, that is pretty rad for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is, especially when I learn something that I'm like, how did I not know this? How come everyone doesn't know this? I feel like there's so many little gems or pearls that, like, the little things that make the biggest impact. And you're like, this is fabulous. Like, people need to know this.
Yes. Oh, I know exactly what you mean. And so that's kind of how I felt actually when I discovered your blends probably about a couple years ago, because I feel like it's so amazing. Like, with the people that I work with that are very highly sensitive individuals dealing with histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome from a variety of reasons, but sometimes we can't use anything to ingest to start. We need something that's going to help calm down that nervous system from a different perspective, whether it is topical or using your olfactory nerve to sniff it. Just something to utilize, like your parasympathetic blend, which, by the way, is one of my favorites too. So I would love to dive into then, just for people that are listening, because I don't even really feel like I know the answer to this, but like, let's lay the foundation for just kind of talking about like what exactly like are essential oils? Like, they are plant derived, but like what exactly is involved in the whole process of them? And then maybe what does make your oil extraction process and the quality of your oils different from maybe other companies?
Yeah, I mean, oils are basically the concentrated essence of plants. And one thing that I think oils, there's this whole like woohoo, people kind of diminish the health medicinal value of certain things by kind of, categorizing it a certain way. But what people forget is that most of our pharmaceutical drugs are derived from plants. White willow bark is aspirin, valerian root is Valium. And these are the concentrated essences. So it's a little farm to table. Imagine going out into the lavender field, picking the lavender when it's the absolute ripest, like the blackberries are just now kind of the perfect, like, oh, they're so good. The lavender is at that level. You put it in a big vat, and then to put water in that would be damaging. So you boil water elsewhere, and then you put the steam through. This is called steam distilled. And sorry, I have my phone on block except for my kid. And then basically, hot air rises, and so it lifts the healing constituents off of the plant, and then you cool the water, and oil and water don't mix. And so the water is the hydrocell, and the oil is the highly concentrated essence. And you can do that with everything, with plants, it's steam distilled, with citrus fruit, it comes from the peel. And what I really care about quality and purity. And so I insist that everything is organic or wildcrafted, which means, like frankincense is the resin of trees. They're really not spraying these trees with pesticides, so grown in places where they're really clean.
Okay, amazing. And so then how then would these oils, like in different oils, like these different extracts from plants, like help certain health conditions? Like are there certain conditions that you typically see that oils might just work best for, or is it like a variety of different conditions? Like do these oils have an affinity for certain organ systems?
Yeah, there is a correlation, and often it's similar to like ginger you use for digestion. Ginger oil is the same. Oils can work on the emotions. They can help kind of. I think of it as like modulating. It's very Goldilocks, right?
Yeah.
It's not that they heal or balance. They're more adaptogenic. They just bring you back to baseline. So take the adrenals, for example. At one point I was taking things like, oh, I'm too high cortisol. Oh, I'm too low cortisol. It was almost like guesswork. Like, let's just try to get it right. And then I discovered adaptogens like ashwagandha. And it's not like you need to guess. Like if you're too high, they bring you back to baseline. If you're too low, they bring you up. And so I think oils are really wonderful in that way. What I think I do differently is that instead of just treating the symptom, I really try to look at what is the underlying root cause, And I think the underlying root cause, my second book really talks about this, like sleep. Sleep is our biggest time for recovery. So if you're not sleeping, that really impedes your ability to recover. And so looking at, is it trouble falling asleep, which is often related to melatonin and cortisol rhythms, or is it staying asleep? If it's staying asleep, what time are you waking up? Is it a blood sugar wake up at 1 a.m.? Is it more detox related, at 3 in the morning or hormonal? And so trying to use blends to put these systems that are out of balance into balance. We kind of talked about a lot of clients, they're doing everything right. They're avoiding all the wrong foods. They're eating all the right foods. They're adding supplements. They're getting sleep. They're, supporting movement and all of these positive things. But maybe they're stressed, or maybe they're doing everything right. And there's that witching hour where they're trying to cook dinner and the baby's crying, the dog is barking, the husband comes home and needs you for something, usually something they can't find. The phone is ringing. Maybe it's your mother-in-law who has opinions that she absolutely must share with you in that moment in time. And you just are flooded. It's too much in that moment. And this was, a lot of my clients, like super smart women doing absolutely everything right, totally could recognize I'm flooded and know, I should be doing breathing practices. And yet it's just too much. And that's why I really love smell. Smell is such a powerful, it's the most powerful of the five senses and the most underutilized. Smell is critical to survival. We smell food, we smell water, we smell predator odor. Smell goes directly to the part of the brain known as the limbic brain, which is really what's driving kind of a lot of those maladaptive stress responses. And we can use smell in ways that we haven't even thought about to help get the body in balance, to return it to baseline, so that then all the other good things that we're doing work better.
There's so many little nuggets of information that you gave there that I could just go off on for like probably a whole episode. So I want to bring it to one piece that you mentioned about the emotional aspect of like possibly like healing. So like regulating our emotions, or if there's stored emotional imbalances that are occurring in our body that might be preventing some form of healing. And kind of before, we started the conversation off air, you and I were talking about how you just discovered a mold issue in your home and that you felt like this helped you to realize like this was a really important piece in your journey, and like your oils were helping you so much. But there's like the emotional piece, and then there's the nervous system piece, and then there's the toxicity piece. And I love the analogy you would use where you're like, it's kind of like the different locks you might have on your door. It's like you got to unlock one at a time. And that was such a perfect analogy. So I'd love for you to talk about, how do oils help with the emotional regulation piece?
Yeah, and I do think there's a lot to that. Like, my first blend was parasympathetic, and that really focuses on stimulating the vagus nerve, which is important. And, I've been doing this for a while, and I still, I wish, well, I'm becoming that patient person I always wanted to be. Like, I could tell it was helping. It's a little bit like I was way out at sea, and I wasn't drowning, I wasn't floating away, but I still wasn't at shore. I was just, was maintaining. And I realized that it's almost like the vagus nerve has cofactors. It's not active in isolation. So for me, one of the first early things that I learned, my colleague and friend, Dr. Christine Schaffner, treats a lot of chronically ill patients, and she was doing a lot of research on the interplay between the vagus nerve and the lymphatic system, especially in the neck. Because what she was finding is that a lot of her chronically ill patients had what she called vagus nerve toxicity. There's a Tufts neuroscientist named Michael Van Ecklinger who calls it vagus nerve infection hypothesis. But the idea is basically this. If your lymphatics are congested, perhaps from excess drainage from toxins in the mouth, it's almost like being in the middle row of an airplane, next to two linebackers. Like your vagus nerve is so compressed by this inflamed lymph that it's not actually signaling and draining. And they actually took sonograms of the neck and saw the inflamed lymph tissue. And then they were using a combination of oils to help move the lymph away so that the vagus nerve now had space. So that's one of the cofactors. Also, our fascia, the fascial network wraps all the way around both the lymph and the vagus nerve. There's a huge interplay. And so, like, for me, all of us that are like bracing for impact, and then the danger's over, and like, any of us that have a hard time with heart opening positions, it's because we're so hunkered down and so, in fetal position. So my fascia was really constricting the vagus nerve. And so the analogy I was trying to share was, imagine your door in your New York apartment. There's not just one lock, because people can break in. You've got the deadbolt and the chain lock and all of these things, and you need to kind of unlock them all at the same time in order to open the door. So I was aware of these three issues, the vagus nerve, the lymphatics, and the fascia. I have a vagus nerve kit for those three. But what didn't occur to me is the mast cell piece. That if the mast cells are kind of overactive all the time, they're continuing to send that danger signal. And then also the limbic piece. And so we have oils for histamine and oils for the limbic system, and also heart coherence. Heart Math Institute talks about how the heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain does to the body. And what Roland McCready shared is that you have to put the heart into a coherent, safe rhythm for those signals to be safe and for the body to actually relax and heal. And there are often blind spots. Like for me, it was mold, who knew, in the ceiling of my bedroom. I also had metals in my body. Suddenly, Wi-Fi, I'm feeling more reactive to that. It's all these things, but the root cause is really that there's kind of this constant stressor. And for me, the stressor was mold that I wasn't aware of. And so no matter how much I was treading water and trying to get my body to regulate, it couldn't really regulate as well while that stressor was still present.
Yes, would you say then it was almost like these different things you were doing with the oils and then also with other supports, like was bringing you back to like your baseline that was kind of like how you could function pretty well on a daily basis. And then, but now that the mold was discovered and it's like, wow, your baseline is significantly different than what it was prior. Is that how we could put it?
Exactly. And the other piece that sorry, I didn't answer the question about emotions. I really think, it's interesting. I love all plant medicine, like essential oils and flower essences. I really do think that there's something about this idea of entrainment, right? So when you're around a really positive person, you feel a lift in your spirit, right? You're uplifted. When you're around like a Debbie Downer or somebody who complains all the time, it's exhausting. You feel like you're slimed. When you go outside and you have like this awe-inspiring view, there's something about nature that it's almost like you entrain with that. And I think nature is naturally harmonized. I think that nature is always kind of in balance, and things like rocks have a stronger kind of, they don't fluctuate as much as we as humans do. And so I feel like part of what we are doing, even when we eat nutrient dense whole foods, when we're interacting with plant medicine or medicine derived from nature, what we're really doing is helping our body kind of return to that baseline, that normal state. And there's a reason that people wear perfume and give flowers, the beauty of nature and these natural remedies. They can't help but lift our spirit. And there's so much research that backs this up. In fact, there is I'm from Seattle, there is a Nobel Prize winning Nobel laureate from Seattle named Linda Buck, who was digging deep into olfactory receptors, and she found that certain olfactory receptors were kind of programmed to pick up predator odor. And then she took it one step further, and she was like, I wonder what can kind of counteract this fear response. And it turned out it was the smell of rose. Like that whole stop and smell the roses. Yeah, there's science behind it. Like when you're having a panic attack, when you're overwhelmed in grief, smelling rose can really help your body, help you kind of move through. Emotions are energy, right? So it's not, it's just moving through the energy. Like you go to places where there's a rainstorm. This is my husband's favorite thing. He somehow knows that, it's going to hit incredibly hard and then it's going to be over in like a half an hour. So he likes to time it where we duck in to get coffee and miss the entire rainstorm. But that's a little bit like emotions. They're incredibly intense and then they pass through you.
Oh my gosh. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I actually have your blend for heart. And is rose in there, or it's in something that I have? I can't remember which one. Is it in heart? Okay.
Yeah, it's in heart and it's in the lung. Like we have some ones that, I've also had my share of grief. Like it's amazing how well these remedies actually work when you need them.
Yes. So so the part talking about nature, nature is a part of us. And I think that a lot of our, what I call like dis-ease is like comes from like this disconnect from being entwined with nature and seeing like just that beauty and that connectedness that we get like when we're outside, away from like the stressors and away from maybe toxic environments, toxic people, whatever it is that might be in your life. And so that community, that feeling of just connectedness is like so important, whether you get that through nature or through the right people that are in your life. But that's a really important thing to be bringing up. And that actually, I want to dive more into the limbic system and the vagus nerve even more, because I really believe that is just such an interconnected piece with a lot of these different conditions to work with. But yes. I'm curious when it comes to the oil blends and when you started formulating a lot of your different blends, because for those listening, going to the website, Vibrant Blue Oils, you can see that you can shop by remedy, you can shop by kind of like condition. It's so cool. So do oils work better like synergistically? Does it not matter if like there's a combination versus like a single oil? Or is like, do you find that like it's just like combination of a few like seem to really kind of, I guess, maybe get better bang for your buck when you're working with different conditions?
So it's interesting. My first job out of college, I worked in the U.S. Senate, actually, for Ted Kennedy on the Health and Human Resources Committee. And my job was helping to come up with talking points for the senators. So they'd give me like a stack of research. This was 1991, pre-internet. And I got really good at reading the research and kind of just figuring out the highlights. And so for my second book, Essential Oils to Boost the Brain and Heal the Body, I looked at all the research. And you know what's funny? All the research is based on blends. It's that synergy. It's that combination. When you think about your dinner plate, your breakfast plate, like all of the food, sometimes we'll just have an apple, like that's totally fine. But often it'll be like an apple and peanut butter, or we scramble eggs and maybe we add other things. We are always synergizing because it's that combination that brings out the best in other things. Even think about ourselves in relationship, right? You have the one friend that's your funny friend and you're funnier with that person. Your other friend who's like, and they're very intellectual and you're like, wow, I have to up my game. We change when we're in relation with different people and different environments, as does everything. And so the blends really, it's a combination, because what you're really trying to do, like, I'll give you an example with parasympathetic, which is clove and lime, right? So clove is super stimulatory, but it has medium-sized molecules. Lime, all of the citrus blends have really light molecules. That's why they're perceived as so uplifting, because they're light. So all of a sudden you get this blend that's super stimulatory and is able to absorb really quickly.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. That is so cool because, yeah, like your blends, I've noticed that they're, a combination of a couple or a few different oils. And I was wondering if the purpose is because they work better together, which it sounds
They
like
do
that.
look
And
better
that's
together. I mean,
very
if you think
cool.
about it, even like with painting, right? There are three primary colors. Like we have red, blue, and
Yes.
yellow, and then black and white. And look at the spectrum of color that we have in the world. Like
Hmm.
we're always kind of combining to enhance.
Yeah. And so this is an interesting thing to bring up. I want to talk about the limbic system because for those individuals that a lot of people are listening are dealing with like hypersensitivities, mast cell activation, histamine intolerance, environmental toxicity. And so a lot of the people that I work with, like, there's a good amount of them that when I want to start kind of implementing like some vagal nerve work or some limbic system retraining. Sometimes that can even be too overstimulatory for certain people. And you know what I've really found to be helpful? Yes, what I've actually found to be helpful is utilizing oils to help support the limbic system because that seems to be a gentle way to be able to help support. So I'd love to kind of dive into a little bit about your blends with the limbic system support and what you kind of like, which oil blends maybe do you like to use to help support limbic system?
We actually have a limbic reset blend that has like there are certain oils. There's a lot of research around certain oils, like helichrysum, sandalwood, cedarwood. Certain oils that have, they've all got their constituents, right? So there's this one constituent called sesquiterpenes that are known to be really oxygenating and help to get into the brain. And so what you're really again, all we're really trying to do is modulate. We're really trying to Goldilocks because with limbic impairment, it's really this hypersensitive, maladaptive response. And so what we're trying to send safety signals, and smell can be a really clear safety signal. And at the same time, how else do you get into the brain? You know, like there's a reason that people, you do anesthesia through the nose and people snort cocaine. It's the fastest mechanism of action. People don't realize nose cells are brain cells, and it's literally the fast pass. And so what I do for like maladaptive limbic responses, we've got limbic reset. I honestly, it's so subtle, it's so small, like that's it,
Smelling smell. Hmm.
and it's interesting. Sometimes when we go to conferences, people come up and start to tell me whatever's going on with them. And when I can tell people are just moving through something, because remember, emotions are things we move through, I'll just open this and like literally put it there. And suddenly they'll like break into tears and they're like, oh my God, I need this, because
Hmm.
I think we all, when we don't know what to do, we do nothing. And so a lot of these emotions are stuck. The other one that I really love is fascia release because the issues are in our tissues. It's not just the brain, we're holding on to them, especially for women. We hold on to them, so many women have thyroid issues because we hold our voice. We don't, that might offend someone. Oh, I'm a little upset, but I'm not really allowed to get angry, So just, helping to move that out or give space for things to flow.
So, since we've kind of been touching on the subject of environmental toxicity, mold, you and I both have dealt with our own environmental illness symptoms and conditions from mold toxicity. So, when I'm explaining when somebody gets exposed to mold to a client of mine or to somebody, I always am telling them like, it's typically not, at least in my eyes of what I've seen, it's not typically like the mast cells first. It's that limbic system that starts to really become affected. And then as a result, it's the vagal systems that, the nervous system then starts to become like very hyper aware. And then we see as a result of that, the mast cell impairment and the mast cells becoming very hyperstimulated too. So you really can't address one without addressing the others as well. And so I guess now that we're kind of on the topic of talking about detoxification and mold and things like that, are there any oil blends that you have that you found to be helpful in supporting that detoxification piece? I know we really already kind of talked about, the histamine blend and then the limbic system support, and the fascia as well. But what about some other
The
ones?
I mean, I think lymph is, it's so funny. There's like, if you look at marketing, it's like, this, the missing link. Everything's the missing link. But
I
here's what
know.
I do think the vagus nerve is very important. I think the limbic system is very important. And I think that, I always talk about like the ambulance that's stuck in traffic is not going to save any lives. The
Hmm.
toxins that aren't able to leave your body because your lymph is super congested, they're just going to recirculate and cause more problems. And this is one of the reasons, like, I love the inhalation pathway, but then also transdermal. Like, your lymph is really close to your surface, and 100% of it is flowing through the clavicles. And I actually just made my own, like, 5-minute lymph protocol because I was looking at, I've been doing this for a very long time, and every time someone gives me a handout, I'm like, this is really confusing. Like, I don't even like, I know this stuff, and I don't even know what to do. Like, let's make it easier. Here's how we make it super easy. This is a roll on. You just roll it on the clavicles. And if that's all you do, that's great. That's good enough. If you want to gently massage, even better, even better. And then, on the side of the neck, because a lot of, especially, we talk about inflammation in the brain. You know what's going on in the brain? This is the exit route of the brain, the neck. And if the neck is congested because the lymph is congested or the fascia is congested or restricted, the good things aren't going to get in and the bad things aren't going to get out. So just by opening, this is like the exit door. Before you scream fire in the crowded movie theater, you open the exit door. We are opening the exit door, and then we are allowing for drainage. And the side benefit of this is if you're getting to a certain age and like Nora Ephron, hate your neck, it makes your neck look nicer. If you have inflammation in the mouth, if your gums bleed, it helps drain the toxins so that you no longer have mouth inflammation. But I love this, and I think that I think that the more you make it an easy ritual, literally just there are 6 points. There's a man, Perry Nickerson, who talks about the big six. I like him. I think he does a good job. But just helping to open the neck, the clavicles, the neck, and then the armpits. My friend Kelly Kennedy talks about when you don't have an armpit, you have an arm puff. That's congested lymph. And you don't need to, have that forever. You can use this under the armpits. You can use it around the gut, the inguinal area. And then my favorite as someone, a retired marathon runner, behind the knees. If your knees hurt, especially walking downhill, this is really great because it just helps the fluid move.
I love that. I love the idea of using the lymph. That's the one blend that I actually don't have. I think so. I've got all these ones for every liver, gallbladder, and stomach, intestines, and everything. But that's incredible. I will have to check that out. And I love what you called your protocol for that, because that's nice and easy. And then, yeah, because you go in and research and there's like, oh my gosh, there's all kinds of things you can do to support your lymphatic system, right? But that sounds like a nice, easy way. And also too, sometimes I find with like dry brushing or some other lymphatic supports, I find that to be a little bit too rough or intense for certain people, especially that are a little sensitive to start. So that's a beautiful way to be able to incorporate just some like drainage without having to really aggravate.
No, and even putting it on the bottom of the feet, like a lot of oils,
Right.
I put on the bottom of the feet before bed. you know,
Okay.
like I use fascia, actually my favorite, and before yoga, between the toes, because, fascia kind of winds around all parts of your body, but it really starts at the bottom of the feet. And so loosening the fascia on the bottom of the feet has kind of this systemic effect.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. You are giving so many amazing tips, by the way. So this is so lovely. Thank you very much. That I'm going to be using because I do yoga a few times a week. So I will definitely be using that blend.
It's amazing. You can tell, especially in the balance postures, like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I feel more
I
grounded.
feel it.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Going back to the histamine blend, because we've been talking about, the toxicity piece, how to support detoxing, how to support limbic system and nervous system. But we did touch a little bit on the histamine blend, but I'd like to dive into it just a little bit more. So with your histamine blend, can you talk a little bit about it? What comprises it? Where it's best put layered onto the body, or is it best sniffed, or using the olfactory nerve? And then, does it help in certain conditions? Like, let's say somebody knows they're about to get exposed in like an environment that might have some mold or might have high EMFs or something that they know is like their trigger and they're working on their healing. Can this blend be supportive to help in reducing that histamine response, possibly?
Yes, because it seems like a lot of hotels are moldy. And when I bring it, it's amazing. It's really designed to kind of modulate the histamine response. And so it's really high in blue tansy, which is known to help with modulation. I mean, it's interesting. It's great for allergies, for seasonal allergies. The three ways that I use it for allergies are either behind the ears, back of the neck, or if it's really intense, I put it on a Q-tip swab and like kind of swab on the inside of the nose. And if it's really, really intense, like some of these mountain states, we went to Jackson Hole this summer. I've never experienced allergies like that. I'm like, ooh, there's a whole nother, I live in Seattle where it rains, so the pollen's kind of clean from the air. So I left it in there. You can leave it in for 20 minutes. 5 was good for me, and suddenly I was good. I also recommend applying it kind of around the navel, belly button, or if you're working with kids, bottom of the feet is a really good application point. It's great if you, I avoid gluten for the most part, but sometimes I'm glutened by accident. That really helps. I mentioned seasonal allergies. I bring it always when I travel in hotel rooms. Sometimes, you don't need to diffuse it, but you can get like a little thing of salt. Like sometimes, how the hotels have the cups and they have that paper thing on top. Sometimes I'll just put a little salt in there and then put a drop or two of the histamine and do it by my bed. So it's kind of like it diffuses while I sleep.
That's a great tip. Yeah, and I really actually discovered that with the histamine blend for myself a couple years ago when I was traveling, actually. I felt like it was very helpful at not only just reducing any responses, but also it actually just provided like that kind of calming effect. Because again, like you said, it's that modulation piece. So I felt like it was providing this calming effect to my nervous system when I was utilizing it. Do you have any other blends that you recommend as kind of like in your toolkit for somebody that might be traveling and might be getting exposed to whatever we're getting exposed to when we travel on an airplane or in a hotel or in Ubers and things like that? Are there other supports you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. I should mention, how the Ubers sometimes have like that weird tree thing that smells bad. I just use my histamine blanket, or I'll put it on my arm and kind of, you can also put it on a cotton ball and put it in your bra. Yeah, when I travel, I never leave home without the vagus nerve kit, which is the lymph, the fascia, and parasympathetic. I also love histamine because it's great for mold in hotels. And then we have an immune support, which is similar to the Thieves blend. Like if I get, like if you go to whatever, I flew the other day and someone was sneezing all over me and I was like, oh, this is fun, So I just kind of immuned myself up.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, I'd love for you to talk about a little bit about how people can look on the website to find out about some of these different blends and like how because I find it very simple and easy to be able to be like, oh, okay, I'm looking for this support for XYZ or something. And it's very easy to find. So I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about your site and how people can kind of discover like the different blends on there that they might be able to utilize for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I was a journalist also. I've been writing blogs for about 12 years. So you can just go into the search bar and like put whatever in and it should pop up. And then we do try to organize them kind of by root cause and then also by symptom. And we've got a lot of kits. Talking about combinations, I use sometimes 3 at the same time. So a digestion support kit, a gut repair kit, sleep supporting kit.
Awesome.
And if they
Well,
have
Jody,
questions, they can email us at info@vibrantblueoils and we'll get back to them.
awesome. Jody, this was a really, really cool conversation because it's always amazing when you can discover something else that you didn't even really realize could be like helpful. It's supporting like just like you're talking about, kind of bring you back to baseline, just something that can be like that adjunct to your treatment that might be like, I know we were laughing earlier about the missing piece, but sometimes like that's what it is. It's just like something that you didn't realize that you needed. And it's something could be as simple as an oil blend or supporting that fascia or the lymph flow and things like that. And so I love that you kind of touched on a lot of those pieces. So this was very informative, very exciting. And I'd love for you to, do you have any last final words for the audience to tell them about your blends?
Well, one thing I do want to say, it's one of the things that I realized with the parasympathetic blend is one of the reasons that we're in fight or flight is we turn on the news, we see something scary, and we project ourselves into that situation. And the world is we can't control the world outside of us at all, but we can control our reaction. Like we've all had those moments when someone's cut us off in traffic and we're like, whatever, I hope they get there safely. And the next day, the same thing happens, and there are four-letter words that are coming out of our mouth. And the only variable is you. And the more you're able to regulate your nervous system and your limbic system, the more you can show up as the best version of yourself. So the world can be nutty and you can still be okay. And I just want to, I think when you're not feeling great, it's really hard to remember that you can always be okay.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, I think kind of on the topic of what we've been talking about on the entire episode is just that there's always going to be these external stressors that we're kind of getting exposed to, whether it is environmental toxins or it's going to be stress that's just occurring in the world constantly. Like that is always there. And the one variable that we can absolutely control is definitely our response to it and like what we can have in our toolkit to help ourselves. So that's a very powerful last message. Thank you. Where can people find you? Where can people look into your oils, look into what you're doing, what you're up to?
Vibrant blue, like the color, oils, and that is our that's us on Instagram and Facebook as well. Okay. And again, if you have any questions, just send us an email, and we're pretty good about answering them specifically.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jody. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.